Okay, this is John from Clock Repairs, Merseyside. I've been asked a question by a guy, Andy, on YouTube, and he was asking about when a mainspring at the end breaks, what you do, type of thing. How do you know? Do we put up? I'll show you what we do, but what I think might be a better idea to start off with is just say, for instance, we're replacing the spring. I've probably done something like this before, I tend to remember, but I may as well go through the whole thing. Now, what I will do is when I get the mainspring, so we have the mainspring here, okay? So then what I will do is I will write on a piece of paper, height, length, strength, and the barrel size. Okay, the main things you're going to need really is the strength, the length, and the height. The barrel size is more a newer thing. Well, I seem to remember years ago you just used to measure these three things, and that's how you'd sort of gauge it. Now, the other thing is that obviously springs now, they are a little bit stronger because they're more of a carbon steel rather than a stainless steel, I think. So they are a bit, so there's a bit of leeway if you get something that to say the strength. So say we measure the height. So the height is simply this, the height of the spring, okay? And in the case of that, it's 19.97. So you'd say 20 millimeters. So you'd put 20 mil down. Right, now, to be honest with you, I mean, you could probably do 19 mil, but if I was going to do 19 mil and reduce the height, I'd probably try to increase the strength slightly. So the strength, obviously, is this part of the spring. You'll measure its actual width, and that's sort of saying it's sort of 0.48. Well, probably 0.40, 41. So I'd probably say, yeah, it's popping. So I'd sort of say on that, I'd sort of say anything, I'd probably say between 40 and 45. I put down 0.45 because you might lose a bit there. Now, the length of the spring is you'd put it in a vise. I'm not going to do that because I'd have to take the camera right there, the phone out of shot and everything. Is we'd open the spring out completely. What I do is I put a screwdriver with a bigger head than the hole through there and then stretch it out, make a mark on the bench and then measure it with a tape measure. Simple as that. That's the length of the spring. Now, that's important really, because if you don't get the length of the spring right, well, there's a couple of things that can happen. It won't fit in the barrel. That'll be the one problem, because if there's too much of it, it won't fit in the barrel. And obviously you want it to wind up like sort of, so it opens out in the barrel. So you want it to be able to wind 8 times or something like that. You don't want it where you're winding it 2 times and it's fully wound up. I mean, that's no good really. The other thing you can do, which we've done it quite a lot really, we find springs which we've got the height correct, the strength is correct, and the length is not correct. So what we will do then is buy a big, if we've got to get a bigger spring, it's got to be bigger. And then what we'll do is we'll trim off the end there to the right length we need, and then we'll re-put a hole in it. So as I said to Andy in what I wrote for him, is we'd obviously, and if the spring breaks as well, it brings everything into this. If the spring breaks at the end there, we'll trim it off. We'll heat it up till it's cherry red. Let it cool down let it cool down. We'll then sort of punch it, but it's got to be in the centre of the, for obvious reasons. I mean, if you have it over here, it's going to be too high and you're not going to get the lid on. And if you have it going too far down there, it's going to scrape on the bottom of the cylinder, the barrel, as you wind it up. So that's no good. It's got to be in the centre, and there's got to be a little bit of a space between the bottom and the top. I'm keeping this so it's not technical. I don't want to sort of start going into things like, this, that, this. This is, my videos are about literally, let's get on with it. You fill in all the gaps, do your reading, read what you can, but fill in the gaps yourself, and to get the job dead right. But this is the general plan, the general idea of doing the job. Right, so that's pretty much that. So we'd make a new hole, and then obviously when we'd finish doing that, I'd heat it up again and I'd plunge it in oil and let it cool down that way, and it gives it a bit of a hardness. What I don't want to happen, and I mean, and I suppose you could sort of temper them slightly again, harden it and then temper it again, cherry red, and let it cool down. You don't want it so it's too brittle, because it'll just snap, and you don't want it where it rips. So it's a little bit of practice. It's worth getting I have many books on various out treatments of metal and stuff like that. The only unfortunate thing about all these type of books is that you sometimes don't know what metal it is, do you? I mean, so the problem you're having, I mean, you can apply all these rules, but it might have more carbon in it, or it might, that's like the mixture might not be the same, and so you're not going to get the same effect, because it's all about moving, atoms and carbon around and stuff like that, so that, this is how it softens and hardens things. But that's the general rule, and obviously, I mean, you don't need to handle springs like I do. This is just a scrap piece of spring which, has come out of something, and I think it's gone at the end there. But, obviously you're going to take it out with your mainspring winder, usually, and then you're going to put it in that way. Often we get springs where they've been taken out, and they're this type of effect, what you can see now, but they've obviously been dragged out. But, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of, fingerprints. You should wear gloves and stuff like that. It's difficult to apply every single rule, really, because it's just not practical at all at times. So that's why I have a sort of type of attitude. Let's get on with it. You know what I mean? You'd have to make up what you do yourself. You're your person. You're your manager. You get on with how you do it. You do it right. That's what I would say. Do it right. So yeah, mainspring winders. Now, obviously, if it goes this end on the inside, that's a bit of a problem. If you break it there, that's a bit of a problem. You can do it, you know what I mean, but it's a bit harder to do it that way. But I would always err along the side of replacing a mainspring if it's been broken and stuff like that. I mean, the reason being, it's been weakened. Now, if you're going to buy a fusee spring, I mean, you're probably not going to, get all these numbers exactly correct. You really aren't. So you're going to have to go for sort of the best you can get. But as I say, if you find the length is too much, I mean, you can always trim off. I mean, that's a good thing to do. Trim it off and get it. I mean, we do that quite a bit, to be fair. It's just something you're better off having this bit of power here. And I think Andy's dealing with a fusee type of clock. With what you want to do with that is when you put your barrel in and stuff like that, wind. This is how I do it. Wind the chain or the line onto your fusee cone, and then gradually wind your spring up until it takes it off. And then when you get to the end, just put, say, three clicks on it, 3 clicks of the, you've got your click, your toothed wheel, click wheel, just 3 teeth of that, that's just to sort of take the slack up of your chain or your thing, and then that way then the cone will take enough off. Because also what I've seen this quite a lot, to be honest with you, is people, rather than change the spring, what they do is they increase the clicks, shall we say, on the click spring, on the tooth wheel click, they increase it. So then once you start doing that, you then, when you wind the cone, there's not enough spring in the cylinder left for it to pull back, and then you're sort of not getting enough winds, if you like, on the cone. So the clock won't run. It'll run for 6 days and 5 days and stuff like that. I mean, that's why really with fuses, I sort of err along the side of trying to replace the spring. The thing about that is, by the time you've got the spring and that, it's going to cost you 50 quid. Definitely going to cost you around about 50 quid, because you're going to need to, obviously the postage, the VAT, and it's about 50 quid. But yeah, that really is it with springs. That's as much as I can say. I don't think I've left anything out. I mean, the very important things to get right is make sure it's central. I can't really point that out enough. And also, obviously, the height of the spring, don't oversize that, because then even if you get it in the centre, it's going to catch on the bottom and then catch on the lid. They catch on the lid probably a bit anyway, but it most definitely is if it's wrong, and you'll feel that crunch as you're trying to wind it. You'll feel that it's, you know something's binding, and it's that also happens if people drag the springs out of the cylinders without a spring winder, so it's sort of shaped like a cone like this. So you can imagine, you grab that spring like that and you pull it out. When it goes back in, you can see the way it's getting misshaped. So if you do that with it, eventually it's going to get misshaped, and you'll put it back in the cylinder. So there'll be a bit of lift, and it'll scratch on the top of the lid. I mean, it's not really uncommon. I mean, you do see it, because a lot of these clocks, I mean, people haven't got mainspring winders. I mean, they're not easy to get. I mean, you've seen my mainspring winder. I've funny enough, I've screwed it to my bench today, because I had it with a clamp and it just felt unsafe. And I've dealt with a few fusey clocks the last couple of weeks myself, and you do need you need to be confident with them, because if they spring off or it shoots off or anything like that, you see my video, I mean, it can it can hit something else in the workshop, or it's Steve or something like or even hit myself. So and as I say, dealing with fuses, put your safety glasses on, and get yourself a good pair of leather gloves, because that's important as well. I'm trying to think of anything else that I would sort of think about. I mean, I tell you, the books you should get, really, the workshop type books. You see them like workshop engineering manual. You see them. There's like a range of them, and they do all kinds of things. And there's really good information in them. They're like model engineering books. There's really good information in them about tempering steel and things like that. And I mean, I've only got pretty much a couple of creme brulee type blow lamps. I've got a bigger blow lamp, by the way, which will do a bit more, but we have a little heat board at the side of this bench here, and I do a lot of silver soldering, and sometimes you've got to do delicate stuff, and they're okay for that, and I do quite a bit of that with that, but everything, it's a lot of things are common sense, but yeah, I can't think if I've left anything out. So your main important things are your height, obviously. That's got to be near enough right. I'd be more tempted to go a millimetre under, and then see, can I increase the strength just slightly. You don't have to go mad. You don't have, just slightly. And then the length, as I say, you can buy something that's over, so you get all the other numbers right, and then something's over, and you can trim it. Do your cherry red stuff, put a hole in it. Oh yeah, also cut the end, cut a diagonal cut off the end of your spring, yeah. And also, where's my snipe nose pliers? What I tend to do, if you look at these pliers, I just tend to put a kick. This is when it's softer, by the way. Put a little kick in it, and then what that does, as it comes round, it hooks into the onto the pip inside the cylinder, Have I got a cylinder anyway? Just let me find a cylinder. Normally have stuff flying around. Anyway, if I draw it for you, I'm just trying to... So we have our cylinder, which is like this. And on the inside of it, here, let me just get this a bit better. Okay, so you got your cylinder like that, and on the inside, you know, it's very hard to look at the camera, but you've got like your little pip here, which is sort of central inside, you know, round the bottom, round, you know, from the top, and it's sort of central there. Well, you want the hole you make there to actually come round and hook into that. So if you put the kick here, it'll come round and it'll hook into that there. Obviously, this hole that you're making, you know, you make it bigger than that to go onto it, you know. Obviously, you don't want it completely massive because the spring's going to move up and down then, you see. So you need to, you know, it goes over it. It doesn't have to be totally, you know, you want it to go over it a bit, you know, that you want it to hook in. That's what you need there. Measure, that's the other thing, measure the spring that you take out. To measure the spring barrel, I mean, again, I'm just trying to figure out. Let me just find a spring barrel for you. Give us 2 seconds. Okay, this is a Hamley type barrel. So as you can see on the inside of there's like a little bit, they've just punched this one, but sometimes it looks like a screw and it's with no head on. It's that type of thing. An actual fact, if you ever get one where it's snapped off, that's the repair you can actually do. You can, you know, you can get a screw and you can file it and, you know, do it that way. When you measure barrels, obviously the size of your barrel, if you're going to measure your barrel, the size of your barrel, it's that, yeah, type of thing. Now, if you notice about a spring barrel, if you separated this barrel, you would see that there's a groove right round the bottom of this, and that's for this sleeve in effect to slot into, and then they braze it and solder it. So if you sort of measure the barrel like that, so say you put your caliper in and you measured it up to the lip there, well, you're going to get the wrong size spring, because you're going to buy a bigger spring and then it's not going to work. So you need to measure the spring. That's what we always do, measure the spring. But that's really as much as I can say about spring barrels, really. I mean, you know, and springs, I mean, it's one of them jobs. I mean, as I say, if I feel like, they say it's got to be 2.5 times or 3 times bigger than the cylinder. I mean, you know, you're looking at that, it probably well would be. I mean, that's because it's off a completely different clock. But you know, you look at them sometimes, and if you've got any doubt whatsoever, and I mean, you know, if you look at that and if you've got to ask someone, do you reckon that looks 3 times bigger, or do you reckon that looks 2 times bigger or 2.5 times bigger, change it. That's it. If you even think where you get a spring and you look at it and you go, God, that's like 5 times bigger, that's fine then, isn't it? You know, you're in. But, you know, don't for what they are, I mean, except for fusee springs, I mean, springs are relatively cheap, and the one thing you don't want to do is not change that spring and then find out that the clock needed a spring and you're winding it up and it's stopping after 2 days and stuff like that, and there's no other reason but the spring, because you've got to take the most of the time you've got to take the clock completely to pieces again to change the spring. So if any doubt whatsoever, just change that spring. Don't even give it a second thought. Just change it for what it is. You know, the customer won't mind paying you another sort of 15 quid for a couple of springs. So just do that. Anyway, this video was for everybody, but specifically for the question Andy asked me. So I hope it's helped. As I say, that's as much as I can figure out that people need to know about changing a spring in a clock. Anyway, this is John from Clock Repairs Merseyside. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.